a damn near domestic colony. Black people are catching more hell, Malcolm would say, than ever before. It's probably worse than it was in the 60s and 70s. Now, I've been asked to talk about the imperatives of Pan-African organization, and certainly it is an imperative. But before that, I do that, please allow me to just comment on the state of Africa and Black America. I know it has already been done, but I just need to add my 2 cents to the conversation. And I want to begin with Africa. And I came in yesterday as Joyce King, one of our most brilliant educators and organizers and scholars, was laying it out. That we have a crisis. And that crisis is a crisis of vision and values in the face of the new scramble for Africa. The new scramble for Africa. It's like 1884 all over again. The new scramble for Africa. We know that there are external contradictions. We know that imperialism, and Nkrumah talked about it. He said that neocolonialism was the last stage of imperialism. We know that neocolonialism is real. We know that white supremacy is real. We know that white supremacy seeks to oppress all that it sees, particularly black people around the world. Problem I have is, as Dr. Betty Shabazz, the partner and soulmate of Malcolm X once said, we may be oppressed, but we do not have to cooperate with our oppressors. And so I'm now becoming like this right wing of the left, right? Because I'm coming up on the internal contradictions. Because if in fact I know a little bit about my art, and I certainly don't know as much as I ought to, but I know that it's about a system, a notion of righteousness and justice. Right. Sure. And so I'm having problems with we know that the external exists, but I just get tired of people saying, but the white folks is making us do it. We don't have to cooperate. We don't have to be in complicity giving away Africa. We don't have to be complicit in terms of the corruption. I ask myself, why is it that Africans should be suffering in Nigeria, and Nigeria has huge oil reserves, some of the greatest oil reserves in the whole world? Why should that be? Except for backward, reactionary, non-visionary Negroes who are giving away the resources of Africa. And we got to speak on it. And I think the diaspora has the greatest opportunity to help lead Africa on these critical questions. I ask myself, where is Africa's Hugo Chavez? Yes. For whatever you think of Hugo, and I had some slight criticisms here and there. But that's not the major point. Is what did Hugo Chavez do in Venezuela? First of all, he gave vision and life to Afro descendants in Venezuela. People need to know about that. Black people in Venezuela. Gave them a sense that they could stand up and be proud of the fact that they were African descendants. And then beyond that, what he said is, we have all this oil wealth. We are going to use it to build a system that serves the masses of the people. That's what Nkrumah had in mind. That's what Nyeri, Sikatore, that's what they were talking about. They were not talking about Negroes lining their pockets in a system of self-aggrandizement and corruption. They were not talking about that. And I don't want to give people a pass on that. Well, the white folks, they do this, and I'm not asking what white people do. The first question it seems to me, asks is, what are we asking of ourselves? What system and standard do we demand of ourselves? And we give too many people a pass on this. And I'm already listening, this is a little more sensitive. It also has to do with human rights. The degree to which people are brutalizing their own people in the name of a righteous cause. I don't imagine that the means justifies the end, not within the concept of my art. At least I'm here to be educated on that question. But I see us making excuses. International Criminal Court has indicted this one, but they've only indicted black people. They only indicted Africans. That's not entirely true, but whether it is true or not, the question is, we need our own independent commission, Dr. Asani, so we can investigate, because some of them need to be indicted because they are, in fact, violating the human rights of our people. And it should not be tolerated. So I got that one off my chest. And now we go to Black America. My last point is a failure to understand, for African leaders, it is a failure to understand the practice of my art as a value to guide leadership and governance. Put another way, an inability to understand the essence of Afrocentricity. Right? So we got to imbue that. So what AFROCENTRICITY International is doing is vital in that regard. And Dr. Asadi has these relationships. And we got to hold their feet to the fire. Now we come to Black America. In Black America, we have an interesting scenario. We now have 2 Black Americans. That's right, I said 2 Black Americans. You know the Kerner Commission report of 1968? Kerner Commission said that we have 2 societies, separate and unequal. Well, now we got a double dip because now we got 2 Black Americans. One that's doing reasonably well. One that's been the beneficiary of the civil rights movement, the human rights, and the black power movement. And the Negroes living quite well. I'm a part of this other Black America. I'm a distinguished something or other at York College. I mean, I'm doing reasonably well. I never thought coming out of the Hill District of Pittsburgh or the coal fields of West Virginia I'd be doing this good. I mean, for me, racism in some ways is, as Ellis Coase put it a few years ago, the rage of the privileged class. We are the privileged Black people. Now, we're not equal with our counterparts, but it's like an inconvenience to be tracked in the supermarket and things of that nature. But we got our cars, we got our degrees, but in the other Black America, and what I call America's dark ghettos, and I use that word advisedly because I go back to Kenneth B. Clark's description of the dark ghetto. A damn near domestic colony. Black people are catching more hell, Malcolm would say, than ever before. It's probably worse than it was in the 60s and 70s. Combustible cauldron of violence and fratricide and mass incarceration born of massive disinvestment. This government does not invest in Black America. Deindustrialization is another phenomenon. And blatant neglect with the wrong complexion to get the protection. And sometimes it seems that we have a nation and indeed our own people who don't care. I mean, week after week, mothers and fathers are crying everywhere because somebody's being decimated, somebody's being destroyed by gunfire and death and destruction in our communities. That's the other Black America. It's in pain, it's suffering. And there's that Black America to which we must pay attention. We got to bridge the divide between this Black America that's doing pretty well and this Black America that they've abandoned, many of them, but not all of us, because it is, as Gabral said, the petty bourgeoisie who at the end of the day commits class suicide and returns to Tobacco Road, all right, to unite and return to the source to help build. And that's what we need to inspire more and more people actually to do. There's a state of emergency in America's dark ghetto. And unfortunately, we have pliant, complicit leadership in the same way that we have in Africa to some degree. More Black elected officials than ever before, and I should, and I've got to raise his name here today. Got to raise his name. I'm going to put it in my notes. Dave Richardson, got to raise his name. I mean, Dave Richardson was the model. I ran for president in 1970, 1992. Well, it was an interesting campaign. But Dave Richardson at the Democratic National Convention, when Pennsylvania voted, I ran as an independent candidate. When they gave the roll call, guess what he did? He voted 1 vote for Ron Daniels. Dave Richardson was the progressive brother out here. But we don't have a whole lot of that, of those kind of people anymore. I mean, we got people, we used to say back in the day, you should become involved in the system without becoming systematized. We have a lot of Black people who become a part of the system. In fact, today, if you're elected, I mean, you have the obligatory thing is, and Dr. Karenga was mentioning this yesterday, and some others, only in America would I have this opportunity to serve my country and the nation and the people. I mean, it's like Malcolm would say, Negroes who have lost their mind. What's the matter for us? We sick? I mean, no sense of, and that is the danger, we'll talk about it in a minute, of this period of the Black family in the White House. But many of them mean well. But some of them stay far too long, and some of them, my friends, they have been there forever. It seems to me being a Black elected official should not be a career. I mean, you serve a few years, get out and get a real job. Do your service. Because after a while, it becomes corruptive. It's corrosive, if you will. And so we have people who are compliant. And in the civil rights world, too, there's just people who are just, right now in particular, who kind of just raise their voices in a muffled fashion. But we lack the spiritual, cultural, and political resistance. Disorientation because we have a Black family in the White House. And as Dr. Karinga said yesterday, and Cornel West said as well, this cannot be. I supported, not IBW, but as an individual, I supported President Obama. He was the best choice. I mean, in broad terms, he was much far better than these right-wing extremists. So I make no apologies for that. But that does not mean that he's immune from criticism. Doesn't mean I'm not immune from criticism. None of us are immune from criticism. We used to talk about, back in the day, criticism and self-criticism. And that's what some of our leaders get away with the same thing today. And the same thing, I won't mention names, but we have people, and by the way, I know that Wall Street is bad. The bandits, what they do is far worse. But we have people who think that they're in political office. It's an entitlement. Because they did good, then they could be corrupt, they do something wrong, and we just have to defend them because of what they did without coming to the people and somebody saying, I did wrong, and I'll try to do better. Marion Barry. I mean, Marion Barry did some good stuff. He got trapped and he got this. But what did Marion Barry do? He came to the people. He stood. As he went off to jail, he said, I will try to do better. I did wrong. Made him a stronger person. But we got a lot of these politicians today, they can go steal, it's chump change. But that's not what we want. That's not the standard that we want. And then we have to defend them. Because the white folks is coming after them. Well, if you get in the way, the white folks will get you when they're coming after you as well. And we don't need to be defended. So I want to move off that, but the point is, again, the state of black America is such that we really need visionary leadership. We need leadership with values and a paradigm of excellence. Doesn't mean we won't fall down, as Cornel West said the other day. I'm not talking about perfection. Obviously, we have warts and knots, and none of us are perfect. But at least what we ought to uphold is a standard for African people. Because when we are at our best, in our right mind, we are they who set the standard. And that's what I'm pleading for and begging for. Now let me conclude my presentation on what I'm supposed to talk about. Institutions, Pan-African institutions. And I want to do this in two ways. I want to give two examples. And one of these is something I talked about for many, many years. It is and I unfortunately, I should have had a chart, but I'm just running and ripping and so forth. But I'll perhaps send it for the record. Because I've been working on this for a long time. It's called a Black Community Development Plan. And it's based on 5 institutions of black empowerment. And I'm going to run through them real quick. Because I think in one way or another, each of these institutions we should have in our community. A prototype of it should be in our community. The first one is a Black United Front, or Leadership Summit, or Leadership Conference. I mean, what is that, right? Kwame Ture talked about it. Dr. Karinga certainly talked about it in LA. It is simply to say that we need to, in our community, no matter what our ideological perspectives are, periodically come together around a table. And the notion is unity without uniformity. That's operational unity. It doesn't mean we may not actually agree on much, but can we find a way to operationally agree sometimes on something? So we sit around the table periodically, and we share ideas. Who's doing what? First of all, who is doing what? I dare say in many instances in community after community, we have people doing things and we don't even know what each other's doing. We're just doing it. Now, one of the problems with it is that sometimes there's tremendous duplication and we don't need to have that duplication. We should talk about something as simple as specialization and division of labor because we have scarce resources. But in operational unity or united front, you can come together and you meet, you share information, that becomes valuable in and of itself. I found it time and time again. People say, oh man, we're going to have another meeting. And then when the meeting go down, you can't stop the meeting because people are learning from each other. I mean, we need to learn from each other. What are we doing? And because out of that may come, oh wow, I didn't know that was happening in West Philadelphia. That's really going down. Well, how can we come together to work together on that? Don't surrender your organizational autonomy, your sovereignty. You don't have to do that. But you find ways to take your collective energy and apply it strategically around a specific goal that you agree on. That's called a united front or a leadership conference. You can call it any number of things. That's the concept that's important. The second one may shock you. It's called a voter mobilization project. Yes, I'm a proponent of electoral politics. Not as the end all and be all. I don't even believe electoral politics is the first thing we ought to do. At the end of the day, most movement, most progress has been made primarily through struggle, through movements, protests, organizing, mobilizing first. But electoral politics is an interesting and important aspect of what we ought to do. Not the only thing we should do, but it is a thing we should do. And quite frankly, when you do the analysis, in America, the biggest political party is not the Democrats, it's not the Republicans, it's non-voters. Most white people don't vote in America. Most white people don't vote. America has the lowest level of voter participation of any Western democracy. It is abysmal. It's a joke for people to hold up the vote as a measure of democracy and then have so few people turn out to vote.
Make it plain.
However, check this out. In a low voter participation environment, the organization that organizes and then quadruples or has the highest vote can have influence disproportionate to its number. So I say 90-90. Let's get 90% of black people registered and try to get, this is ideal, 90% out on election day. We will have power disproportionate. I mean, they'll come looking for us because they want to know. They'll come looking for us, right? Now it just came down, right? For the first time in history, in this last election, black folks outvoted white folks. Well, there was a reason, by the way, too. Because, it's an interesting proposition, Regent Sanford. We are interesting people. Go with the affirmative proposition, we may go to sleep. Tell us we can't do something. Oh, no. You going to take the vote away from us? When, where, how do I ain't never voted before. Then white folks trying to say, they came out with this whole thing of voter identification and voter, and people got on the radio and something. So black folks, it backfired because black folks marched on ballot boxes like never before. In critical states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, the margin of victory was the black vote. No question about it. Because we mobilized and organized. It could be even greater because we still have probably something like 20% of black people who are not registered or who do not vote. So there's room for that. And that's an operational unity exercise as well. Black people coming together to maximize and get black to register, educate, and get people out to the ballot. The third one is called a Center for Community Organization and Development. Prototype, Center for Community Organization and Development. And what this is, it's based on some work we did in Youngstown, Ohio, because we had a group called Freedom Incorporated. But somewhere in the community, there must be a place where there's activist organization and activist activity, but particularly the training of activist organizers. See, that's kind of what AI is. You see what I'm saying? It's not a mainstream organization. Y'all wouldn't want to be branded with that. You know what I mean? Y'all that mainstream. You're in the community. You're at the grassroots, community-based level, synthesizing both scholars and the community, the academy and the community, but training and organizing people. And that's key. And we used to have that all across the country. The Political School of Coweta, the Lynn Usan Institute, right? The Cabral Institute. I mean, we had these places all where you could go get some training. And they were people, organizations doing work in the community. That's still probably here in many places, but every community ought to have that structure. The fourth structure, and certainly Philadelphia, by the way, was one of the, and my twin walked back in the room. Thad Mathis is back now. You see, that's my twin right there, right? He back. I already gave you your props, brother, my twin. I already gave you your props, all right? Let's give it up for Thad Mathis again, all right? But I say Philly because Philly for many years was a hotbed of independent politics, right? In fact, we founded the National Black Independent Political Party where? Right here in Philadelphia in 1980. So we don't need to be locked into the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Voting for the Democrats is a tactical maneuver in relationship to a broader strategic goal. But we need independent political organizations that can what? First of all, engage participation, get more people involved in the political process. But it also needs to be a situation where we have an agenda and we're measuring people against that agenda. I mean, we might conceive, we might vote for some socialists, we might vote for some communists, we might even vote for some Republicans. You see what I'm saying? We should be able to exercise independence. And so we need independent black political organizations that are training people. Now, Charles Barron is doing some work with this in New York, by the way. He is putting together a group called Empower, in which he's trying to do that. And we need to do these kinds of things, again, all across our community. That's the fourth structure. Final structure is not new, but it's a prototype again. We need in every community a Black United Fund. Yes. Now, yesterday, Dr. Merritt, is it Reed? Reed Merritt was here yesterday, right? And of course, Bill Merritt heads that structure. It's a long history going back to Walt Breedmont and the United Brotherhood Crusade that Dr. Karinga, by the way, had something to do with. And it's not what it once was. That's sort of beside the point. In every community, we ought to have a structure that is helping to raise resources to finance our struggle. Now, we can do foundations, that's fine. We can do corporate sponsorships, that's, we can figure out who from who and we ought to be socially responsible. Because we in IBEW, we ain't taking no alcohol, we ain't taking no cigarettes, we ain't taking no Walmart. I mean, other people can do what they want to do. We have certain, by the time we get finished, ain't a whole lot left. Because we're not doing some of these things. I mean, we don't know whoever else does, that's fine. But we won't do that for certain reasons. And we have a hard way to go because we're too black. I mean, we're just too black. I mean, some people in the foundation were saying black is just a problem. What? I mean, it's a little problem. So we need it would be great and to be able to go to structures in our community. Now, fortunately, you in Philadelphia, as was mentioned yesterday, have some sources that have been very progressive and very forward-looking. But we need these Black United Funds type structures in every community across this country to help finance our struggles. Whether it's social movements, political movements, we need to have an independent source of doing that. And ways by which you can just do payroll check off, or you can do now what's called recurring payments from your checking account or your credit card to help finance that. In fact, we're doing something like that. Not this, but I mean this recurring payment thing through what we're doing with IBW with a brother out of Baltimore. Great example. Since 2001, this brother has sent us $10 every month. $10 every month. And so we're trying to get 100 people, 1,000, whatever people to be able to do that as well. So those are 5 structures that we need, in fact, to have in our community. Now I want to shift to another structure. And I won't deal with the African Union. There's a whole discussion we can have about that. But I'm talking about what we can do here. We have in New York, and we've been working with this, and of course, Dr. Sanford has been a part of it. Dr. Linda Jeffries has been there as well. We have something we've been quietly working on called the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. It is a notion that if we talk about Pan-Africanism, if we look at the new African community in the U.S., we got 50,000 Nigerians in Houston, Texas now. You can go to Jackson, Mississippi and get some jerk chicken now. I mean, we got, I mean, I don't even know the numbers. It's a huge new influx of immigrant Africans from the Caribbean and the continent and Afro-Latinos who are here. Problem is we can be the same color and occupy the same space. That does not necessarily mean that we're in conversation with each other or that we're working together. In fact, there may be divisions. African Americans saying, what are them Caribbeans doing? Caribbeans saying, how come them Negroes so lazy? I mean, y'all hear the whispers, right? We can't have that. If we're talking about practicing Pan-Africanism, why can't we practice it right here? So what we do, Pan-African Unity Dialogue meets every 3 months for about 2 hours. We say 2 hours. They come late. We have to stay late. But there's something, I don't know if that's in the DNA or whatever. But nonetheless, the idea is we come together. And when we come together, we share with each other from our particular perspectives, because we may all be African people, but we do have our specificity of ethnicity. I think I heard Dr. Karinga say yesterday, nothing wrong with that if we understand the broader sense that we are, in fact, an African people. And we dialogue. And some people left the table because we just talking, but it was a rich conversation. We ended up with 3 or 4 issues that we began to boil down to work on. For one thing, we raised our voices because Gil Noble his program was knocked off the air. Betty Dobson brought that to us from Imhotep, and we worked on that for a minute. But also, there was a question of the NYPD and the FBI infiltrating these Muslim mosques, many of which are African American mosques. Imam Tatab Abdul Rashid brought that to us, and we began to raise our voices around that as well. The other major issue, and you can go to our website and see this, was immigration policy. Because some of us began to treat this immigration issue as if it was a kumbaya exercise. Let me say that again. Let's all get along, right? Now, I'm the former executive director of the National Rainbow Coalition, so I'm for getting along. I rainbowed the rainbow. That's my record. But wait a minute. Coalitions are based on what? Mutual interest. Immigration is not a Latino issue. I mean, the majority of people happen to be Latinos, But we got issues that affect people from Africa, from the Caribbean, and from Central and South America who happen to be of African descent. And what we begin to discover is that, there was no reciprocity. We want to talk about bringing Haitians in, and we want to talk about, okay, we're with it, and what are you with, and those kind of concerns. And we begin to see that there were some provisions provided for some and not for others. And even in this most recent legislation, they were trying to cut out the diversity visa program that is important in terms of bringing in people from Africa and the Caribbean, and they were going to trade that off with a STEM program. They were getting ready to cut our interest. And so we say, no. We are for it. We cannot be against it. There are too many reasons to be for immigration reform, not the least of which is this country snacks Mexico. Mexicans just coming across home to their own border. This is not nonsense. We go back, and then the whole thing about how Europe underdeveloped Africa is the same thing in terms of the underdevelopment paradigm that applies all throughout the world. You rip off people's resources, then they come in, then you try to hold them back, and then you exploiting them at the same time for their cheap labor. We know it's a game. But in the process, we want it to be equitable, fair, just, and inclusive and non-discriminatory. And somebody has to be on the watch for that. So if you go to our website, you'll see a document that lays out what we think are the key issues of concern to people of African descent. Because when you are engaged in politics, you are engaged in a coalition, everybody puts their interests on the table. It's not a kumbaya exercise. And so we laid that out. The final thing that we're working on, and we put it on hold for just a minute, was a declaration of principles for foreign investment in Africa. Dr. Shelby Lewis came from Atlanta, and people, y'all know, and certainly George King laid it out yesterday. This idea of Africa just being given up. So we have this idea of developing some very simple principles, that are based on ideas that Nkrumah would agree with. I think Van Springone and others that, it's about not only national liberation, about national reconstruction. Preserving the resources for the fundamental use of the people. And if you're going to use the resources on the basis of equitable exchange. In the internet world, we believe that we can put this document together, put it out among the grassroots, the masses, and let it percolate a little bit. Let the masses of the people begin to demand that government and, in fact, those leaders, use the resources in a certain way. That's the other project that we're working on in terms of the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. So these are two structures that I think are imperative, that are important in terms of building our work. Now let me close, because I now have 2 minutes left, and I talk fast. Tried to do the best I could to get through it. With something that I wrote in 1970. Because at the end of the day, organization is important. The brother who did that brilliant presentation this morning on technology, question was raised about how these youth, because at the end of the day, whatever it is, vision and values must guide it all. Technology running amok outside of a framework is just that. It'll run amok and it will destroy us. This is like the old folks say, the white folks done destroyed the weather, and they have. We just reached a tipping point with carbon emissions, right? Just reached a tipping point. These people are insane. They are. They're insane. We can't adopt that values. They're going to be destroyed. They are insane. And so therefore, values must guide us. So I close with this pledge that I wrote in 1970. The Marcus Garvey School for African Education. Some of you use it in your schools. And it goes like this. We are an African people. I learned that lesson from a great surgeon. Her name was Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore encountered me in 1967, 1968. And oh, what an encounter that was. She said, I'm a brain surgeon. My job is to operate on constipated minds. So Dr. Karinga, somebody told me my brain was, I needed some X-Lax. I needed something. And God, thank God I ran into Queen Mother Moore. And she took me around, and I drove her around, and she just kept working with me and working with me. She said, honey, you got to understand, just because a cat has kittens in the oven, don't make them biscuits. You understand? You are an African person. And she would say, the Italian is Italian because there's a land called Italy. The Polish is Polish because there's a land called Poland. You talking about you a Negro, where's Negro land? Oh, man. Not even black, but you're an African person, honey. So she talked about that. We will remember the humanity, glory, and sufferings of our ancestors and honor the struggle of our elders. I think I heard that talked about yesterday too, right? That's an ethic. That's a part of who we are as a people, that we remember, first of all, our humanity, knowing who we are and the struggle and honor the struggle of our elders. Fannie Lou Hamer once said, always know where we came from and honor the bridges that brought us across, right? We must strive even today to bring new values and new life to our people. As our people are suffering, bleeding, and dying, we must bring new life to them. We must have peace and harmony among us. We must be loving, sharing, and creative. I mean, yesterday there was a whole lot of discussion. I think Dr. Cornell Wells talked about it and others, and Dr. Kringle, love. Not some mushy moot. That ain't, that's good too. But I mean, it's an undying love. It's a spiritual phenomenon about how we embrace each other, how we know each other. I mean, back in the day, we used to say, you say, hello, brother, hello, sister, until the OJs came out with that song come out, don't be calling me your brother while knifing me in the back, and all of a sudden, everybody got suspicious. I mean, today, I'm nervous about even striking up a conversation with a black person, because they might like say, well, why are you talking to me? But I'll talk to them anyway, because we must have this undying love. We must be loving, sharing, and creative. We must work, study, and listen so we may learn so we must teach. As I reflect upon my life as an African person, yeah, I'm a distinguished lecturer now, but who would have thought it when I came out of the Hill District of Pittsburgh? Who would have thought it was I was in Youngstown, Ohio? The mother and father divorced, mother having a nervous breakdown, father who didn't quite understand me, sister who comes from up north to help be my mother surrogate, some nosy neighbors across the street, the Terrys, who was looking after us, and I didn't appreciate it. But this education is their education. Yes. It does not belong to me. Yes. Had it not been for those sacrifices they made, I would not be a distinguished anything. Yes. And so we must learn to teach and work to build, but we must share that. It's an ethical obligation that we have to our people, that we share what we have in terms of what we've learned. We must cultivate self-reliance. Stop paying for what we want and begging for what we need. We still have this tremendous amount of resources that we are not using in our own self-interest. We must struggle to resurrect and unify our homeland. That's Pan-Africanism. We must raise many children for our nation. And that doesn't mean we're asking our sisters just to have a bunch of children. That's not the point. The point is there should be no motherless children, no fatherless children in our community. I think our brilliant Queen Mother was talking about that this morning. I mean, she could have just went and did it as an occupation. She was a mother to those children. I've been involved in educational struggles, and we would go fighting and battling in school. It was not my child biologically, but they were our children. Talked to Brother Ebo. By the way, thank you, brother. He was so kind, did so much stuff. I love that brother. That brother talking about his commitment, what he's doing these days, and his queen. I know about you too. He done told me all about you too. Right. All good. All right. But the point is that no motherless children, no fatherless children. And part of what that means is that we must extend ourselves. Sisters in the neighborhood, she doesn't have a father figure for that child. We extend ourselves, and it ain't about getting over either. It's about just extending yourself as a father figure. And vice versa. Father trying to raise a child by himself or her children by... Sisters, come help. No motherless children, no fatherless children in our community. We must have discipline, patience, devotion, and courage. This is a long-distance struggle. It takes discipline, it takes patience, and it takes courage. Kids can't just back up every time things get rough. It's a long-distance struggle. We must live as models to provide new directions for our people. Because we will be free and self-determining. Because we are an African people. We in Imhotep school, the world's first multi-genius. We built the pyramids. We dealt with mathematics and astronomy before Europeans even know what was happening. Timbuktu, University of St. Gory. We are a great people. Only question is, where is the latest pyramid? Where is the latest multi-genius? Let's get busy. Let's go to work. Build organizations. A luta continua. A luta continua. A luta continua.